Welcome to the Rocky Mountain AI Interest Group. The following meeting, entitled Generative AI in Education, took place on August the 8th, 2023 at the Atlas building on the CU Boulder campus. Presentations were made by Dr. Peter Foltz, Dr. Teresa Nugent, and Dave Taylor. For future meetings, check out our meetup group and also our website at RMAIIG.org.
Welcome, everyone. We'll get started. Glad you could all make it. So we have people in the room and people on Zoom. And this is our first hybrid meeting, so bear with us if there's any technical glitches. We're going to see if we can make this work. My name's Dan Murray. I help run the Rocky Mountain AI Interest Group. And just wanted to thank you for being here. The meeting will be recorded. So if you're in the room speaking, like asking a question or making an announcement, we need to have you speak into a microphone so that the Zoom people can hear you, or ask the question and one of us will repeat it into the mic so that the Zoom audience can hear you. Okay, so what I want to start with is introducing one of my fellow board members, which is Grace. And she's going to share some information about the Atlas building, which is this beautiful building that we're lucky to have for our meetings. So take it away, Grace.
Hi, everybody. So as Dan said, I'm a Rocky Mountain Artificial Intelligence Interest Group member, a passionate one, and a board member, I guess. And I'm also part of the Atlas Institute, which is this beautiful building, which is also an idea, the idea of radical creativity and invention. We have a undergraduate, graduate, and within that graduate, master's and PhD program. I am a master's student here. I also did my undergrad here. It's very fun. It's very weird. We get up to a lot of things, the BTUs, the Blow Thing Up Lab. We also are one of 12 research institutes within CU Boulder, and we focus on anything from nanotechnology to brain music interfaces and smart textiles. It's a real joy to be part of the Institute, and the Institute finds it a great joy that you all are here learning about AI. Woo! So with that, I will give it back to Dan. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you, Grace. Appreciate it. You know, we've talked a little bit about our vision for the group. We've shared some of that over time. In addition to sort of making friends with the AI robots early, we're really trying to create a gathering point for the AI-related community in Colorado. And we're trying to connect different parts of that ecosystem together with the group. But I want you to know this is your group. So feel free to like step forward and suggest something. You know, if you may want to launch a new initiative within our group. We actually have several RMAIIG subgroups already, and there's another one that's in formation. And the idea of the subgroup is it's a group of people that are sort of assembled around a particular interest area in AI. So for instance, we have a legal AI subgroup, which is run by Chris Brown. Chris, raise your hand. Yay, Chris. So that group is looking at AI use cases for lawyers and also legal issues related to AI more generally. So it'd be like copyright and trademark and patent and, you know, the lawsuits flying around. There's all kinds of stuff going on the legal front. There's another group that's the marketing, content, and sales AI subgroup run by Laura Rich. Is Laura here? Okay. This is a group that's looking at, it's gathering sort of marketers, technologists, and entrepreneurs, and looking at learnings around AI, sharing tools, and highlighting use cases. And then there's a third group that's about to start that's AI product development. And if you're interested in that one, like we already have an organizer, shoot me an email, dan@rmaiig.org, or you can message me through Meetup, and I will get you plugged into the organizer of that group. But if you want to start your own subgroup, you can do it. You know, it might be like in your professional discipline or in your industry vertical or something that you're excited about. Just raise your hand and we'll help you get it going. We'll help support you and we'll help launch you. Let me give a shout out to some of the board members and friends who are here that make all this happen. You've met Grace Wilson. Grace, thanks for all your help. Anna Ron is on the Zoom call. Sean Carter is one of our board members who helps the group. May Chen is right here. She's helping during this meeting. Thank you, May. Richard Gann does a lot of our AV and all the video editing, very time-consuming video editing. And then I'll give a special thanks to John Backus. Is John here? Yes, John, hello. Thank you for helping support us and helping us book the room. Really appreciate it. And then also Grace Wilson, Mark Gross, CU, of course, and the Roser Atlas Center for generously arranging and providing the meeting space for us. Also, a shout out to Chris Byrne here for all his help booking future speakers and topics. Thank you, Chris. And Ken Frickless, is Ken here? Ken helps us with a lot of different things, and he designed our friendly robot logo. T-shirts coming soon, so keep an eye out for that. So big round of applause for everyone that helps make the group happen. Thank you, guys. Upcoming meetings. It's going to be after this one, it's second Mondays of every month, September through December. So Monday, September 11th is AI and robotics, and we're going to have the Furhat robot back. And we're looking for one other speaker there. Furhat is this cool social robot that's ChatGPT enabled. And you may have seen it at the June meeting or seen videos online. We're going to learn more about that, see behind the scenes. It's very interesting. It can just interact with you, answer questions that you ask, and it's fascinating. Then October 9th, Monday, October 9th will be ethics and AI. We have 2 speakers booked for that. Monday, November 13th is going to be legal issues and AI. That's the one Chris has been so helpful in booking speakers. And then Monday, December 11th is our holiday spectacular, which means we don't have anything booked yet for that. What would you guys think of a member showcase where members would sort of show off their cool AI stuff? Like, anyone in favor of member showcase? Yeah, great. Okay, so I would like to just do any announcements from the crowd. This would be like AI job openings, local events, other groups, whatever. As I mentioned with Zoom, you have to talk into the mic, so I will run the mic out to you. So let me just open up the floor to anyone that has an announcement. So, okay, Trevor.
Thank you, Dan. Can the people on the Zoom see me from here? There we go. Hey, everyone. My name is Trevor Uptain. I am the CEO and founder of Hyper AI. So I'm pretty new to Boulder. I came out, my background is at Google, Core ML. I came out here to start my startup. We were backed by Antler and an angel investor in my 3 weeks, first 3 weeks in Boulder. So it's been a great experience so far. When I got out here, I realized there isn't really an AI conference in Colorado. And me and some friends, 2 other machine learning engineers, Justin Fenn and Patrick Barker, as well as Claire Tempest from Antler, turn our weekly lunch meeting into an AI conference. So I would like to invite you all to AI Peaks. It is on October 14th. And yeah, we set up 2 tracks for you guys. One for the more technical oriented folks who can set up a pipeline and learn how to quickly implement some LLM solutions into their web applications. And then some stuff for the non-technical folks as well. AI in marketing, and just bringing AI to your community. We're still working a little bit on these workshop titles, but amazing to get connected to you, Dan, and Grace, and Laura, and Ken, and a bunch of people from this group are helping us out. So yeah, please come. I think it's going to be really fun. Tickets are free. The URL is aipeaks.org, AIPEAKS.org. And yeah, I hope to see you there. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Trevor. I will also post that URL to our list. Have no fear. Trevor, by the way, was the winner of our Chat Tank startup pitch night. So startups pitched a panel of investors, and Trevor was the winner and got a cheesy bowling trophy from us, which I don't think he brought tonight. Let me do one announcement that Brian Griffin sent. I think Brian is on the Zoom call. Monday, August 28th, there's a Boulder AI Builders Meetup from 5 to 7:30 p.m. There's 20 spots left of the 100 spots. It says, come meet the people building interesting products with AI in Boulder. We'll have snacks and drinks, a few demos, and a chance to hear who's hiring in the space. The last one was packed and A+ quality attendees. If you're interested in doing a demo, let us know in your RSVP. It's organized by Matchstick, VC, and freeplay.ai. So that's Boulder AI Builders Meetup, Monday, August 28th. Shoot me an email if you want any more details on that, but you should be able to just Google it. Okay, any other announcements from the audience? Laura? Yes, Laura. So Laura is the one that I introduced earlier. Here, it's okay. You can say a word about the subgroup.
Hello, sorry to be late. I'm supposed to be up here. Okay. I'm Laura Rich, and I put up my hand to head up a subgroup on marketing, content, and sales. And we met, hi, Dave, sorry. This is what happens when you're late. You're just all flustered. So anyway, we had a great meetup a couple weeks ago, and we'll be meeting once a month. We also have a group on LinkedIn to connect, and hopefully, if you're interested in this, it's for anybody who's either a practicing marketing professional or maybe a startup and you're promoting your business and doing some sales as well, or maybe you're a content professional, and we cover everything. So yeah, that's it.
Cool. Thank you, Laura. Chris, do you want to say, talk about the legal subgroup? I should have put you on earlier. Here you go.
It's okay. Thanks, Dan. I'll get in front of the Zoom here, I think. I don't know if I'm in front of the Zoom. My name is Chris Brown. As Dan mentioned, I am leading up the, Sean, I believe, say another group member back there, the legal AI subgroup. So if you're a lawyer, care about use cases and for AI, if you are a non-lawyer and just care about legal topics, I think you'd be a great member as well. We're not exclusive to just lawyers. We're having a coffee meeting Friday, August 18th at Amonte Coffee on Walnut Street. And if the crowd gets too big, we'll hop into Galvanized Co-working, which is right behind the coffee shop. That's where I work out of. So email me, I guess, if you have questions. My email is Chris, CHRIS, @pixellaw.com. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. I periodically send out, the names and emails of the organizers. And so you'll see that on past announcements and future announcements as well. Okay. Other announcements from the audience. Raise your hand if you have any other announcements. Going once. Okay. We usually start where I'll ask a few questions to the audience. We'll find out who's here, and then we'll move on and I'll introduce our first speaker. Okay, so for how many people is this your first meeting that you've attended? Okay, and how many have attended a meeting before? Great. How many thought they were going to Toastmasters meeting but ended up in the wrong room? Okay, a couple of those. How many people work in the AI field? Consider themselves working in the AI field. How many are in academia or education? Which I would expect to be a lot for this meeting. How about in industry? Working in industry and other areas? Government? Anyone in government? Do we have any AI robots that are impersonating a human? Anyone retired or other categories? Okay. How many people have used ChatGPT? It's kind of a silly question. How many subscribe to ChatGPT Plus? That's the $20 a month subscription where you get the GPT-4 model. Okay. How many use ChatGPT at least every week? That's most people. How many use it at least several times a week? How many use it every day? Is anyone using it right now instead of listening to this meeting? Okay, so other tools, chatbots. How about Google Bard? Anyone use Google Bard? Okay, maybe 20%. Bing Chat. How about Claude? Claude 2, couple, Jasper. Other chatbots, is anyone using other text chatbots? Which ones? Llama? Hi. Spellbook for lawyers? Any others? Google GSE, Generative Search Experience. Cool. How many are using AI for help writing programs, for programming help? A lot of people here. How many are programming large language models themselves? A couple. How many are using ChatGPT plugins? And is anyone using other browser add-ons that are related to AI, like prompting tools? Okay. How about for image tools? Is anyone using Midjourney? Okay. Dolly 2. What about Dream by Wombo? My hand goes up. That's my favorite one. Stable Diffusion. And other image tools. Anyone using other image tools that I didn't name? Which one? Imagine.ai. Okay, cool. Okay, so I would like to start this meeting with a personal story. Each year, I usually mentor a student in the business school at CU, an undergraduate student. It's the Leeds Business School. And my mentee from the prior year, so he was a senior 21-22 school year. He's now working at a company in Denver. And he was a business student undergrad here and then graduated in May 2022, started his job in the fall of 2022. And he sent me this text on Feb 13th of this year in response to my question about AI tools. I was like, hey, have you checked out the AI tools? And he said, yes, I love ChatGPT. I use it almost every day for work, whether it's crafting a better way to word an email or for Excel formulas. I'm interested to see how Google's AI system turns out. OpenAI also partnered with Microsoft, so it'll be interesting to see if it gets implemented in the software. Spoiler alert, yes. So think about that, like in the context of like AI in education. ChatGPT came out November 30th of 2022. You have a recent CU grad who's like 6 months into his work career. Only 2.5 months after the release of this tool, this world-changing tool, he's using it daily for competitive advantage in his job and for his firm. He's becoming more efficient. So, with that, I'll sort of ask the question, like, do you think students should be learning about and using AI tools? Like it's just a great, like, real world example. And then maybe more importantly, how best to do that? Like, how does that work? What does it look like? And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So let me introduce our first speaker. Dr. Peter Foltz is Executive Director of the National Science Foundation's AI Institute for Student AI Teaming, which is called iSAT at CU Boulder. It's an interdisciplinary research community dedicated to transforming classrooms into more effective, engaging, and equitable learning environments. Incidentally, CU Boulder hosts one of 5 NSF $20 million AI institutes. So this is one of only 5 in the country. And that's to accelerate research, expand America's workforce, and transform society in the decades to come. Dr. Foltz is research professor at CU's Institute of Cognitive Science. His work covers machine learning and natural language processing for educational and clinical assessments, large-scale data analytics, cognitive skills in reading and writing, team collaboration, and 21st century skills learning. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Peter Foltz.
Thank you, Dan. Let me check, make sure audio's working here and virtually as well. Good. So yeah, I'll start off with just a little story as well, sort of how I got it. I mean, the topic of this is large language models in education. So how I got into really sort of focusing on AI in education is I've been working in AI since a graduate student many years ago here, but when I was first a professor, I was teaching very large introductory classes, in this case, large introductory psychology class. One of the things I know, and this partially comes from psychology, is the best way to make students to learn is to make them write. So as a newly minted assistant professor, I decided, why don't I just have the students write essays every week? They'll really learn a lot from it. What I found was I was spending my whole weekends grading essays, and what would happen is I would hand the essays back to the students. They would look at the number on it, stick it back in their folder, and walk away. And so I realized that there was no learning in that. So because I had actually been working on something that was now a precursor of large language models, but essentially a small large language model at that time, I developed some technology along with some colleagues to automatically score students' essays, not just for the quality of their writing, but also for the content of the writing, and put it into the class. And we started using it, and we could have students write essays, get instant feedback, and they could revise and resubmit their essays as many times they want. And then I could still look at the last one. What we found was students not only enjoyed it, but they also learned. And so that really started off sort of my work in applying AI to education. Let me get my talk going. There we go. So I'm going to talk about large language models, both some challenges and opportunities, and I'm actually combining two different talks here. One of them is part of a talk I gave to the Board of Regents, who late in the fall contacted me as well as some others and said, hey, what is the university supposed to do about large language models? And so some of us gave some advice about it. I don't know if we gave them solutions. And the second thing is I'm going to talk about some of the work happening at the Institute for Student AI Teaming. And sort of between those two, what I really want to do is really point out some of the directions I think that AI is going in education, as well as some of the challenges and opportunities that are happening there. So first thing is, I mean, we all know that our world is really changing rapidly to AI. I mean, we sort of now just routinely say, hey, is it going to rain the next hour? Or, you know, suddenly something tells you need to leave at 5:24 to get to your talk. And there's more insidious things where somebody, a computer just asks, is that you in a photo? And you don't quite know what it's going to use it for, but it's probably using it for something. And now it's sort of like, you can say, well, write me an essay on the use of water as a symbol in T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, and it will come out with something pretty good. So we need to sort of adjust to the fact that the world is rapidly changing, and what's happening is suddenly everybody is starting to notice, and if you've sort of noticed the news there, it's coming out everywhere, and some of them are sort of doomsayers. The college essay is dead. It's gotten better doing writing assignments. And there's also a lot of talk about sort of what are the business opportunities that are happening there, and how do you actually turn this into something that's going to be useful and profitable. And then we say, well, are these new large language models actually having an effect on how education is being performed? Dan already sort of gave example. People are using ChatGPT there. So I'll put out just sort of two things. This is the company Chegg. Chegg develops study material. Some of their study material looks extremely close to educational material that has been done by other publishing companies, but they sell a subscription to it. And they suddenly reported that they're going to not make the same kind of profit they've been making in years, and their shares tumbled 50%, pretty much due to ChatGPT. Second example is a student at Texas, or a professor at Texas A&M Commerce, who decided, well, I'm just going to submit all my essays to all the student essays to ChatGPT and say, did you write this one? And ChatGPT said, oh yeah, I wrote that. Oh yeah, I wrote that. And then the professor said, okay, you all fail. Now, I like that because I think this is one of the key points here is AI literacy is going to be really important here about how to use these tools. These tools are going to keep on coming out, and how do we think about using them? And I'll also point out that, you know, AI in education isn't new. You know, from the 1980s and even a little bit earlier than that, there have been effective tutoring systems out there. There's been AI-based assessment of writing and speaking that's been around, that's actually used. If any of you have kids and they take the standardized assessment run by Colorado, a program that I wrote is probably grading their student writing. Good news is that there's also a human grading it, but if the two agree, then that's the grade they get. If they disagree, it goes to another human. But that technology has been integrated in a lot of different places there. And there's a lot of uses because you can use it for practice or you can use it for large scale assessment. But a lot of that sort of earlier AI was trained on very specific examples for the students. Often there's a lot more hand building of the models. It also tends to be unimodal, as in it captures writing, captures speaking, it captures some particular action. Whereas if you think what a teacher does in a class when they're working with a student, they're looking at gestures, they're looking at what the student's looking at, they're looking at how the student is speaking, they're looking at what the student is writing, and they're combining that into a much larger picture to be able to adjust to to be able to teach the student. And a lot of these models didn't have a lot of generalization, and they really focused more on being able to assess rather than to be able to generate. So what's different about generative AI? Now, the nice thing is Dan asked some questions at the beginning and almost everybody raised their hands. So almost all the stuff here is probably something that almost everybody knows about somewhat. But, you know, I would say that some of the key differentiators are that generative AI generates new content rather than just analyze or act upon existing data. And that is a real differentiator because it allows the creation of all sorts of different material. And I'm not going to go into any of the details about generative AI. What I'm going to really want to do is focus on some of the examples and then some of the implications. So since I put it up in the beginning, yes, you can ask ChatGPT to write an essay on T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. It's actually pretty good. And the nice thing is it's not just giving something very general, but it's actually talking about sort of water as a symbol, and it is pulling up that information and picking up some good examples there. You can also, if you're a student, say, well, write a 300-word essay on comparing, contrasting, but make some grammar errors and make some spelling errors. Now, this makes it much harder for a poor professor who looks at this and goes, well, that can't be generated by a computer, because nobody would have made that kind of a stupid mistake if they had a computer. So it's actually very good there. You know, it says things like, you know, has its roots, and roots is misspelled. There's other little grammar errors in there. But there are some really nice things. You can take any text and simplify it for different levels. So you can say, you know, explain Rogerian psychology to a 12-year-old. You can also say something like, well, explain explain a certain aspect of biology to a physicist, and it will sort of be able to pick examples there that will turn it around there. So it's able to pull out some very useful things there. But this has some very nice implications for education in terms of text simplification, in terms of being able to generate novel content that can be personalized to students. And it can be used for developing programs. I use it a fair bit now. It's definitely sped up my programming, partially because I'm extremely rusty. And so, but on the other hand, it does tend to make a number of errors. And so you have to go back and check some of these things there. But it actually can do a fairly nice job for it. And then if you're an instructor, you can do things like say, well, I need to build a scoring rubric because I just assigned an essay, and you can give the essay and say, what would be a good scoring rubric? And it pulls out different things about, here are some of the things that you would need to talk about in this topic to be able to do it. You really want to focus on use of evidence and organization. Then there's going to be things about mechanics and style. But a lot of the things is that it also points out some of the things that are important in terms of talking about the CFA Frank and what a student should talk about. So this actually sort of provides it sort of as, think about it as a way, as a tool for instructors. There's a lot of challenges for using large language models in education. And, one of the key things is that LLMs are based on the data they're trained upon. And so they can have false information, they can have hallucinations, they can be wrong, they can do biased information. These are some of the things that I've tried. So if you say, what is the world record for crossing the English Channel entirely on foot? It says, the entirely on foot is 12 hours and 10 minutes. And it missed the point that I said on foot, but it does sort of say, well, the route is usually completed either by swimming or using a combination of swimming and wading. So it sort of tried to come back to saying, well, yeah, it was on foot, but it's not. You give it certain kinds of math problems, it's not going to do that. And there's been a lot of examples out there of biases. If you ask Midjourney to generate pictures of what it thinks professors look like, it reflects certain biases that are inherent in the population there. So those are things that you want to think about, because if you said, well, grade these professors, grade these pictures of professors that people drew, and you draw something that doesn't look like one of their average pictures, it may do something different. So some of the other challenges there is, okay, well, we have all these models, and we saw, there's ChatGPT, there's Claude, there's Bard, there's Llama out there. How do we know that if we're going to apply one in education, what's the right model? Is there a way to certify that the model that's been built is the right quality there? There's always the question about plagiarism detectors. They don't work. There's been a lot of them out there, but I get asked that question a lot. Detection of LLM plagiarism, just too many false alarms, so they cause more problem. Another thing is we may be creating student dependence on this technology. So the question is, how do you train students to be able to think on their own in situations where they'll think on their own? Or how do you create situations where they'll be able to build enough where they know how to use the tools when they can use the tools, but when they also can't there? There's lots of issues about privacy. If you use Zoom, you can see that this week Zoom changed their privacy laws that says all data on Zoom may be subjected to use for their AI models. So if you're saying anything on there, it may be incorporated in a new model there. And then there's big equity questions because, so we have access to these, but, what's the difference between a student who is paying for the premium version of ChatGPT versus the regular one? What about students who don't have any access? So those are all some of the challenges that come up there. but there's a lot of opportunities there. I mean, it can help speed up what teachers do in terms of syllabus development, building and developing course material, also building assessments. It's actually really good at building short answer quizzes and multiple choice quizzes there. It can do really nice scoring of open-ended responses. But I think probably the biggest is it also is a forcing function to make teachers think about this. What is the goals of your assessment and learning in your class? If everything can be answered by ChatGPT, are you having the student do the kinds of things you really want to do in that class? And so, you know, some of that is to think about, well, how do you design your class for more human interactions? Or, you know, how do you get more critical thinking in there? How do you get more collaboration? How do you get more creativity in there? The kinds of skills that students are going to need to use when they get out. And for student learning, there's a number of different opportunities. One is as a social collaborative partner, and that's what I will talk about next there. But I think there's a lot of nice things it can do. It can be used for practice, and students can iterate with an intelligent system, learn a lot, but still then have that scored by an instructor. It is really good at adapting, both adapting materials, but also adapting to various different students' needs, and being able to personalize the feedback. So I'm going to sort of now switch a little bit and go into talking about very quickly about AI as a social collaborative partner. And this is the work that's happening at our institute. This is the Institute for Student AI Teaming. We're headquartered here at CU, but we're 9 universities across the United States that are doing this work. And our goal really is to build AI tools that are social collaborative partners. And the idea is to support both teachers and students as that. And we want this to have students who learn more effectively, also learn to engage, and also work more equitably. And the focus on this is really not on how do we teach content skills, but how do we use AI to teach collaboration skills. So our idea of this really is that if we can put students in socio-collaborative experiences, how can we then actually promote more learning of the content areas? So we're not focused on saying, how do we teach science? How do we teach math? We're focused on how do we teach collaboration and then put students in these collaborative situations that improve their science and their math. So what I'm going to sort of talk a bit is something that we're called, one of the things we built, which is called the Community Builder. And the idea of the Community Builder is a system that we have running in a series of middle school classrooms and St. Vrain public schools, as well as Denver public schools, which monitors students when they're doing group work. It gives them feedback on a set of community agreements, which I'll talk about, and how well they're following class norms, and supports them in terms of sort of building the relationships. And a lot of this came by doing workshops with students, with teachers, to sort of understand what they need for it. So before I sort of show what it looks like, I'll just talk a little bit about what it looks like under the hood. And this is one of the things is we're analyzing a lot of different things. We're actually placing microphones in the middle of groups of students who are all working together in a project. We're capturing all the audio as they're talking. We're also capturing video. And then we're running it through a series of different analyses. So these are some of the analyses, like what's the quality of the acoustics there, because it can be really noisy in a classroom. We're looking at sort of how much each person is talking. We're able to do automated speech recognition on it. We can tell whether they're on task or off task. We can see whether they're actually specific to a topic they're supposed to be talking about. We're doing models that automatically assess the collaboration. So we're looking at things like whether the team is functioning well, whether they're building knowledge, whether they're negotiating or coordinating at that. And then we're also capturing where they're looking. So where they're focused, whether we're seeing joint attention on the same things or looking at different directions, what they're looking at. So we're able to combine this all into sort of a model there. And that's not the student interface because students don't want that kind of feedback. Instead, because we're working with middle schoolers, what students are trying to do is to try to follow certain classroom norms. Like, are they being committed to their community? Are they being respectful? Are they moving the thinking forward? Are they being equitable while they're working in a team? And what we're doing is we have a small visual display of a tree, and that tree is growing. The more they talk, the more leaves that appear on it. The more they're the more they're moving their thinking forward, red flowers start to bloom on it. The more they're being committed to the community, orange flowers grow on it. And part of this is working with sort of the design that you can't just give graphs to students, but what you want to do is sort of be able to motivate them with this. And they're sort of looking at the tree, or they'll sort of talk about it and go, oh, look, we're a little bit low on respect here, and it gets them to reflect, sort of come back to this. So this is sort of how we want to think about AI. AI isn't always just this agent or robot that's going, hey, you're not being respectful. But what we're trying to do is drive more positive behavior there. So I really won't go through a lot of this, but sort of if you want to sort of know under the hood, this is just one of our models that we're doing here. We've got audio coming in. It's run through Whisper ASR. We're using a Roberta encoder where we've got models for these different types of agreements that students are making there. So we're classifying everything they're saying based on those agreements, and then we aggregate that, filter it, and then put it out in terms of sets of graphics for the students. And that actually fits into a much larger architecture where we're actually doing multimodal processing of capturing other things like their eye gaze and other things. But this sort of gives an idea of sort of how sort of what's happening under the hood for the work we're doing. So just some conclusions on all this. One, sort of from the larger picture of large language models, we want to think about large language models as tools. They're not replacements for teachers or students or for getting students to do critical thinking there. We do want to sort of be careful because they're going to continue to get better and better, and even over the last year, so you can see some of the things they do is that they're getting more capabilities. But there's still a lot of issues of unreliability and bias. And my view is that 89 to 90% of the work that people are going to do, they can apply a large language model to education, and then they're going to spend 80 to 90% of their work building guardrails to protect the students for that. And matter of fact, I've worked with several companies where that's what you're doing. You can't have it go off the rails, particularly with middle schoolers there. So there's always going to be a lot of validation and checking, making sure it's appropriate there. But a lot of this is really thinking about how do you design AI where there's situations where humans in the loop. In our situation with the Institute, almost always teachers are seeing these outputs as well, and they're helping students interpret them, so they're seeing it there. We want to be aware that students are always going to have access to and will exploit these capabilities there. So faculty are going to continually need to adapt there. And so I think probably the key thing here is to make sure that students and teachers become better consumers of all this. So, but sort of from the perspective of sort of where we think all this is going to going and sort of where things are with the Institute is that most AI, including a lot of the large language models work so far, is really focused on a uniparty, that is one person, unimodal, that is one mode of communication there, and it's really focused around sort of automating a workflow for some personalized learning. And some of the new ones that are out there are still doing that. What we're doing at this institute is really thinking much more about multimodal, multi-party learning, that students are learning with lots of different kinds of input, lots of different ways of interacting with each other. So we want to look at the gestures, we want to look at where they're looking, what they're saying, how they're saying it there. But we also want to look at students learning together, not just a chatbot working with individual students there. And so really, this is the challenge that we're doing is really sort of focusing, how do we build some of these new kinds of agents at the same time as how do we improve students' literacy? And with that, I will stop. And
thank you, Dr. Foltz. Appreciate it. We'll switch the lav mic to our next speaker. I just wanted to say to the people on Zoom and the people in the room, we're going to bring all three speakers up at the end for Q&A. So for people on Zoom, you can type your questions into the chat window, and then we're going to have someone in the room here relay it, and we will read it from the podium. So we'd like to answer your questions. You can put them in right now as the speakers are speaking, and any time during the meeting, and then we'll read those, and we'll have our panel up at the end. And then for the people in the audience, we will we'll have you ask the question, and then we probably have to repeat it into one of the mics so that the people on Zoom can hear, and then we'll go forward. Okay, let me introduce our second speaker, Dr. Teresa Nugent. She's an associate teaching professor of English here at CU Boulder, where she teaches in-person and online classes, including writing composition, literary analysis, Shakespeare, and science fiction. She's currently working with colleagues to create a Writing in the Age of AI course to help students develop the practical and analytical language skills that they'll need for success as technology transforms how we communicate and write. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Teresa Nugent.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much to Dan for inviting me to join you guys tonight. I am not here as a technical guru, so I'm kind of blown away by what we just saw and all the things that Peter is creating, and we need to talk. So I am here as one of the many humanists who kind of got bowled over this past spring when ChatGPT came out, and we just sort of like, oh my gosh, what is this thing? So I have been teaching in English literature and writing classes for over 20 years. And I've also, a lot of those classes have been online that I teach for continuing ed, or I teach for the Department of English. And I don't think very many people in our department were prepared for this to come. So there's been a lot of gnashing of teeth, I would say, in places outside of the engineering building. So I wanted to get a sense, and Dan already did this. I was going to ask who all was here in terms of educators, and how many of you. The one question that wasn't on his list is how many of you were teaching in classrooms or online during this past year? So I just have really a few of you who are like in the trenches right now in terms of, like my students, what are they doing, and how do I know? And as you mentioned, none of the AI generator detectors really work. So it's a whole different ballgame from the kind of plagiarism issues that we've had up until now, where, we have pretty reliable detectors, and we can sit down with the student and say, well, this paper that you gave me also appears on this website. Why? Or, it's from this paper mill or whatever. And this is just not that situation. So I'm curious how everyone is feeling. How many of you are feeling overwhelmed? Thank you. Anxious? Thank you. Good. Cautiously optimistic? Yes, good. And excited. All right. Well, this is a very good optimistic group. So that's cool. if I was in the English department, I don't think that would be quite the same number distribution of hands. But so to give you a sense of where I'm coming from, this is how I felt when I first started realizing what was going on. Like, oh, what am I going to do with this? So as many of you were in similar situations, you were all reading the same news. Some of the headlines that Peter showed. Teachers are concerned about cheating. That's a big one. New York banned AI, ChatGPT in their school system. Some people are predicting that teachers won't be needed anymore, which of course makes everyone go a little crazy. This is the one that I think struck me the most, that broke all the illusions that anything was going to ever be the same again. A Columbia University student wrote for the Chronicle of Education about how many students were using ChatGPT, how they were using it, and how it was not detectable. But he also outlined for a lot of educators how this could be something positive. This could be used in ways that we could help improve writing. And I think that was a little bit mind-blowing too for a lot of us. So one of the things he did in this article was he called out faculty to start reassessing how they teach and start reassessing what students need to learn and know how to function in this AI world that we are all in now, whether we like it or not. So there we are. So these are some of the responses that I started hearing from colleagues in the spring. And many of them really wanted to ban AI and had to be convinced begrudgingly that that's really not an option. A lot of them started saying, okay, I'm going to have all handwritten assignments. I'm going to no more take-home essays, back to blue books, more in-class testing, more oral exams and presentations. Some of those things are good ideas, but they are certainly not scalable if you have 200 or 600 or more students in a classroom. The testing, to some extent, is. So we're slowly sort of wrapping our heads around, okay, in the English class, what kinds of assignments, if everything is available out on the web and ChatGPT has come and scraped it all up and can regurgitate it and rearrange it, then what can we ask students to do that is different? And so this move towards more introspective assignments, getting them to find their own personal connections to the text that they're reading. Those are some of the ideas. More active learning, which of course has been a mantra in the education world for some time, but this might get some more faculty actually practicing it. Classroom discussions, debates, role-playing, projects, presentations, all of this, I think, this is when we start to see sort of the energizing side of what is coming and what the positives can be for how educators are responding in the classroom. And then some people are actually also saying, we need to rethink plagiarism completely. This is one of the websites that I recommend to faculty who are looking for suggestions on how to integrate AI into their teaching. ditchthattextbook.com by Matt Miller. And so he's got, sort of this whole spectrum, and he's not saying one definitely is plagiarizing, one's not, but let's sort of map this out and ask students to do certain things with AI and then use it to look at their writing and think through, what's working, what's not. I don't have not the level of computerizing it all and having AI already integrated to that extent. But if I'm in a classroom with 20 students, I can be, having them run questions and discussions and conversations with ChatGPT and sharing those conversations with me, and I can be looking at those and we can be talking amongst ourselves, so that there's this hybrid human AI ongoing interaction for them to really focus on the writing process instead of just, I need to do this paper, here it is, good, I'm done, I can check that off my list and go on. And so along with all the wringing of hands, there was some hopeful glimmers of this could work out well. Teachers are inviting ChatGPT into the classroom. Don't ban it, teach with it. And that was the New York Times, Kevin Roos, I believe, or am I getting that mixed up? Not sure. And then maybe this is actually the thing that's going to change the whole playing field in a really positive way. So things are, maybe looking up. So these are my takeaways. It's not going away. We need to figure out how to work with AI tools, and it's a constant process because they are continuing to get better. The hallucinations seem to be not as extreme as they were. The layers that different tools are going to keep spreading over the AI bots, and all the ways that they're going to make things more seamless. So it's going to be this learning curve, and I don't quite know where we are on it yet and how big it's going to get. Students, that's the number one thing, is that students are going to need to know how to do this in the workplace, and that's the message that I am actively trying to send and share with my colleagues, and send to students, some of whom are also in denial about this, especially in the humanities, I think. So then the graduate students who are learning how to teach, and they're having to struggle with this, they're not all like you guys. So it's a process of kind of getting everyone to a point where they feel like this is okay, I can do this. And that's really important for the students for a number of reasons, which I will go through here. They need to learn how to use AI safely so that they don't hurt themselves. And this is a question that I have that perhaps this room can talk about. One of the things that I've heard is that when students feed ChatGPT with their own writing, often it comes back and it gets picked up by things like Turnitin, and then they get flagged for plagiarism just because their work is in the system then. So that's something I want to learn more about and educate my colleagues about, so that we don't make bad assumptions about what our students are doing and make false accusations. Using it responsibly so we don't harm others, and that's this long list of social justice issues, accessibility issues, environmental issues. And then I'm also very much concerned about how the things that we're doing in the classroom, when we make changes such as suddenly we want students to do more oral presentations, say, or in-class writing. Over the last several years, we have really built out our accommodations for a variety of learning needs. And some of those require extra time for testing, or they require technical devices to perform writing exercises, or there's a long list of, there's a lot of anxiety issues that some students have about doing performance in front of other people. So we've been really working hard to accommodate all these different situations. And it feels like all of a sudden, all that's getting thrown out the window because, okay, we got to go back to old school and, do these other things so students can't cheat. And so I'm really worried about the effects that it's going to have on those students. And we need to take some time to figure out how to make sure that we don't lose our sensitivity to all those different needs. So that's another one of the responsibility pieces from the educator side. And then students need to know how to use AI effectively. And this is just sort of the base practical, which tool for which purposes, for what kind of tasks, so that when they go into a work environment and they're asked to do certain things and they're expected to know how to do this, they have some idea how to do it. And then the most important piece of this that I think is our responsibility as educators is to help students develop a sense of confidence that they can deal with this. It's going to keep changing. We're going to keep going through disruptions. We're going to keep going through new technologies that are going to come along. So you can't just learn one and say, okay, I'm good for a while. That we kind of learned now that that's not going to be the case. But some of our students haven't learned that yet. And then they get overwhelmed and they give up. So we have to help them sort of develop this sense that, okay, I know how to learn, period. And I can keep learning new technology, new methods, and move forward. So one of the things that I tend to do, and my colleagues tend to do as humanists, is we look for historical paradigms. And this is a list of very recent ones that will be familiar to all of you. We all just made it through the pandemic and did a lot of very quick adjustments on the fly to teach online when that wasn't necessarily the way that a lot of people were teaching before. The effects of social media, the smartphone, the web, and the calculator is a very frequent analogy used for thinking about AI right now. There's some situations where you want someone to not use a calculator so they can show that they really understand how math works. But then other situations, it's like, yeah, you need to use a calculator because we got to get on to higher levels. So there's going to be similar scenarios with AI. And we just have to kind of work our way through and figure out what those are and how do we help students figure out which ones to use when. But I also am very enamored with older models. So the telegraph, all of a sudden, communication could spread long distances much more quickly than it had been previously. This was a huge technological change that affected life tremendously in good and bad ways. The printing press was heralded as the instrument of the devil by many people when it was doing its work initially. And it brought about wars and persecutions and all kinds of extreme revolutions came into play because of the printing press. And even the technology of writing itself was controversial and contested. Socrates was very distrustful of the effects of writing and felt that those who wanted to really possess knowledge and wisdom would put themselves in detriment by writing down information, because then they wouldn't memorize it. It would not become part of them. And I find this really interesting. And I pulled out a quote from the section where his writings, which he doesn't write. He didn't write it down, his ideas, but Plato wrote them down, thank goodness. And so, of course, this is a translation. You provide your students with the appearance of wisdom, not with its reality, when you have them write it down. Well, doesn't that sound an awful lot like what people might be saying right now about AI? And I just thought that was particularly interesting. And then I wanted to pair it with this other quote from a current leading expert on AI and education, who says, humans need to excel at things AI cannot do. And that means more creativity and critical thinking and less memorization. So over the span of many millennia, the idea that memorization is what is the basis of knowledge has obviously shifted. And I'm very intrigued by, how are we going to continue to, how is our definitions of knowledge and wisdom going to continue to evolve and shift over time? So now what? So with all this sort of big picture thinking, I'm going back to my classes and getting ready for the fall and thinking, okay, what am I doing? And what are my primary goals? And going back to the basics, I want my students to come out of my classes having developed their critical thinking skills and having their curiosity and their creativity fostered and nurtured. Those are major goals. I want them to develop empathy. And this may sound like an unusual one to some of you, but this is very much a focus of humanities courses. Empathy and compassion. When people are able to put themselves into other people's shoes, read their stories, think about their stories, and think about the challenges that they've gone through, they become more understanding of other perspectives. And that's very much what one of our goals certainly in literature classes. Obviously, writing and communication. I mean, those are basic skills, and that's pretty much across many sectors of the university, not just in the humanities. Collaboration skills that you mentioned are becoming, I think, more and more important again as we think about more project work. But then the last one again is the one I mentioned earlier, the intellectual agility, that sense that I can do this, I can learn new things, and I can constantly be adjusting and adapting with whatever comes along because I've done it in the past and I kind of know how to think and learn, even if I can't always anticipate where the next challenge is coming from. So with all of this in mind, some colleagues of mine and I got together this summer and decided, okay, we need to rethink the way that we are teaching writing, integrate AI, and think about our writing courses in particular as a place where our students can start learning how to use these tools as part of the writing process. And so we proposed developing a writing in the age of AI class. And we're also going to propose a certificate in this topic that would have a number of, how much time do I have? Not much. So I can tell you more about this if you want to know more about this, the Q&A. So that's more details about the class. And what I plan to do this fall is do more group work, more project work, but we're also going to be doing assignments where they're required to have conversations with chatbots and bring that into their thinking process, put that chatbot into different roles, have that bot challenge them about different things, and they're going to assess the output that they get. Whoops. And they're also going to do a lot of verification of sources, because that's a big question that we have in the humanities about whether or not students are going to rely on sources without checking them, or if they're going to learn how to really figure out, is this a credible and an authentic source. And then my final thing I just want to end with is this sense that, and this, I think I'm preaching to the choir here, right? But my message going forward to whoever will listen is that the AI bots are not sentient. It's the humans who construct and project a persona on the language that machine learning mechanisms put in front of us. And it's the humans who ultimately need to figure out, how are we going to use this technology to shape the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nugent. I'll just ask you to transfer the lav to Dave. you know, the common theme that's coming up here is really creativity and critical thinking. It's like what are the students learning that's not just the memorizing and stuff like that. And I'm appreciating kind of the challenge here for academia. It's one of these, like, I got thrown out of the plane and I'm building my parachute on the way down. Like, I just can't imagine how hard it is to rapidly retool in with this changing technology that's hitting so fast. Earlier this year, I was at a professionalism day for sophomore business students, and we were talking about AI. They're almost all using it. And their question for me was, what field should I go into in business so I don't get displaced by AI? You know, like, how do I AI proof my career? That's a really hard question to answer. You know, like we talked about how to add more value, like when you're at a job, like what are some of the things that add more value? Like you're forming teams, you're maybe creating new products, or you're generating revenue streams, or whatever. And what were some of the areas maybe that added less value that could be displaced by AI? But these are the questions that are on the minds of students, you know, every day right now. These are sophomore students, and they're already asking, how do I AI proof my career? You know, so I loved your presentation. Let me introduce our third speaker. Again, a reminder to everyone on Zoom, you can submit questions. I see you've already started. You can submit questions on the chat, and then we will ask those. We'll bring up our panel after our third speaker, and we'll do Q&A for the remainder of our time. Our third speaker is Dave Taylor. He's a lifelong entrepreneur, educator, and storyteller. He's launched 4 startups, published over 20 tech and business books, and he runs a tech Q&A site called AskDaveTaylor.com. He also reviews gadgets and gear on his popular YouTube channel. I think he was the originator of the first co-working space in Boulder way back when, and I was there, so that's how I know. This is before all the famous ones that you've heard about. He teaches marketing and communication courses at the University of Denver, where he's been recognized as a DU leader in teaching excellence. Dave's an award-winning speaker, startup mentor, and proud parent to 3 college-age children. Please join me in welcoming Dave Taylor.
Thanks, Dan. All right, I assume the microphone's working. So now my next technical challenge is end show. This hopefully will just take a couple seconds. Voila. Okay, so I'm the person who's actually in the trenches. So I teach for the University of Denver. I teach completely asynchronous online. So what that means is I never am in a classroom with my students, and they are from around the world. And it's a really interesting space to teach in, because there are students that are really committed and they spend a ton of time and they really love the material. And I teach classes on like communications and society and film theory and how that affects media and stuff. So lots of fun stuff. But there are also students that are just like, all right, I have to do an assignment by Sunday at midnight. So Sunday at 11 p.m., there's a flurry of activity from people that are like, they have lives, they're busy, they're taking care of a sick mother, you know, they have children. I don't think I've had a single quarter where I haven't had students say someone's died or someone's sick or I'm sick or there was a flood or an alligator broke into our house and ate my dog. There's always amazing explanations for why they couldn't do something. And that's just part of the space. So, you know, the whole AI introduction into this space has been really fascinating, because you would immediately think, like that quote from earlier, that these students are going to just say, oh yeah, now I have tools. And so the interesting thing is that I've only had one student so far where I was thinking maybe they were using an AI tool to help. And I actually kept feeding their content in, and the AI checking software was like, no, this is an AI. And I realized as I looked at what they did over time, they're just a little disconnected in their writing. So it would be like if in the movie Up, right, with Doug, the dog, So, you know, this person would be writing about something and then there'd be a random sentence. It would be like squirrel. And then it would go back to the subject and it would be like, do humans write this way? And the answer was yes, this person actually wrote that way, which I figured out over time. So, you know, when I'm looking at all this AI, I'm really trying to understand how is it able to be used to help the students with their experiences. And I will tell you, the University of Denver, we have a lot of angst about this. So we have meeting after meeting, we've had training sessions, we have IT people coming and showing and giving demos. And then one of the things that turns out to be really important is that we can't actually tell students they shouldn't have used a tool unless we tell them in advance that they can't use the tool. So that's something I'm going to talk about as I go through my presentation. I will say I'm totally fine if you want to interrupt me with questions or comments. That's totally cool. I will repeat your question for the Zoom audience. But here's how I didn't prep for this talk. But you know what? I could have, because I went to ChatGPT and I said, create an insightful 20-slide presentation about uses and risks of AI in higher education. And boom, it gave me 20 really interesting slides. I didn't do that, but I could have done that. And that's exactly how I think AI can really, really help students, is that brainstorming piece. So again, I'll come back to that. And I just want to point out that in higher ed, plagiarism is already a nightmare. It's endless. And, you know, it's something, sometimes it's as just embarrassingly dumb as I copied and pasted a paragraph out of Wikipedia. And I will tell you that, you know, another debate in higher ed is Wikipedia a valid citation source at all? But then for the students to do that and not think, oh, well, I need to cite it, or they forget to use citations, that's yet another thing. But plagiarism's already an issue. And so at the university, you know, we use something called Turnitin. And I think it's really important to tell my students, here's the parameters within which you're working. Here are our expectations. Here's our definition of what plagiarism is. Here's what we will and will not allow you to do. And ultimately, like CU Boulder, like so many other schools, it really comes down to our honor code. And the honor code is something where it's sort of a kumbaya document where it's really kind of nice and you gotta, you know, be really honest and straightforward and professional and empathetic, but it certainly hasn't been rewritten for ChatGPT. So, you know, I look at all this and I'm like, okay, well, you know, they sort of got this all figured out, but they don't really. Because I can read this and I can say, well, if I give a rough essay to an AI tool and it polishes it, is that okay? Well, I'll tell you, I asked all my students to install Grammarly, right? So Grammarly is an interesting gray area. How many people use Grammarly? It is the cat's pajamas. Just install it. The free version's just plenty good enough. It just really is great. But Grammarly introduced an AI module. So now you can get Grammarly Plus that has AI that actually will do the writing for you. So just like you saw in that graph of like, you know, what's plagiarism and, you know, how much does the human have to be involved, even Grammarly ends up being a little bit tricky. It's like, do I just turn in my raw writing? I'm not sure I want to read raw writing from students that are coming back to finish their bachelor's degree at 45. I'll tell you, there's some interesting essays. But the reality is that cheaters are going to cheat. And so here's something I bumped into on Reddit, and I thought this was really actually pretty funny. So they turned in this essay and just went and tweaked a couple of things, and they got a really good score, but they were already checking for plagiarism. And I thought, you know, this is no different to what Peter was showing, where it said, give me an essay, but have a couple of spelling and grammar errors in it, right? And so the point is that there are going to be people that try to subvert the system. There are going to be people that try to sidetrack things. And I've taken my own discussion prompts and fed them into ChatGPT and just like, what would it say? How would it respond to this question? And of course, the fun thing about these large language models is you can give it multiple or the same prompt multiple times and it's different each time, which I guess fun might be maybe not the right word, but so they're pretty sophisticated if your goal is to get to the other end without actually having any learning along the way, right? So when I went onto Google and I searched for like best college essays marketing assignment, right? So this is stuff's already out there. It's been out there for a long, long time. I get solicitations from these companies saying, hey, do you want to sell us your essays? And it's just like, I'm a professor, come on, go away. But they're out there, they're making money, they're making a lot of money. But when I did that search, I also got these other questions that people are asking Google in this space on things like, does ChatGPT work for college essays, right? Well, then why have college essays if everyone's just gonna do this? But how many people, when you applied to college, hired a consultant to help you write a better essay? So why is that okay? But using an AI piece of software to do that isn't okay, right? So I think we have this sort of fundamental challenge here, and I think that the AI is more sophisticated than previous tools, but we've been doing things like analyzing readability for sufficiently long that I was doing that when I was an undergrad. I was doing some experiments with that. So at the University of Denver, we use Turnitin. And Turnitin is a really sophisticated plagiarism checking tool. Do you use that here at CU too? Yeah, so it's enormous. It's this massive piece of software. And in the last year, Turnitin has introduced an AI scoring system with much of their own angst about the whole thing and lots of, like blog posts from their engineers and stuff. But the challenge is, how do you actually do this in a way that it makes sense? So here's an example of a student essay, and you can see that it gives you that 75%. So, this is this like fake accuracy. It's like, oh, heck, 75%, why not 72% or 81%? But the way it works, at least the way we have it set up, is that it's just one of a number of things that come up when you actually ask Turnitin to analyze something a student has submitted. So I can turn it on and off. I can actually turn it in, and students never get to see this side of things like Canvas. So I can go and I can say, it's okay, skip anything that's quoted, which would be really great, because when you have students that do a lot of quoted material, it looks like it's plagiarized. And then it's on you, the teacher, to differentiate. They've quoted it and they've cited it, so that's okay. But it's 20% quoted material, right? Is that plagiarism? So even there, before we even get to AI, we're still back in that sort of gray area. But it gives you this bar of score, and you can see that second one is red. There are 10 things it thinks might be plagiarized. And then on the bottom, there's an AI score, and we even hide it, because at the university, we're not sure we really believe that number. But if I click on it, it gets to that page, and it will show you, and you can see here, Turnitin is also hedging their bets, where they're like, all right, 75%, but here's how we're doing this, and this might not be accurate. And I think that's important, but maybe it's not that important. Maybe the accuracy of these tools doesn't matter, because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to figure out how to create a learning environment and then help students travel the road that will give them, if not enlightenment, then at least the ability to have a little more understanding on the subject, right? So if we all watched a movie and I did a Roger Ebert, as he did famously, and stopped the movie and talked about what was happening, then hopefully you'd get to the end of the movie and you'd say, wow, I learned something I didn't know, right? If I asked you to write an essay about that, well, I suppose you could use an AI tool to write that essay for you. But even that, I don't really care. What I really care about is, did you learn a different way of seeing that movie, right? And so a lot of AI and a lot of academia is hung up on this detection issue. And I think ChatGPT just withdrew their AI analysis tool. and they just said there's too many false positives. But that's because no one's getting any education in academia on how to use those tools, right? If we go back to the previous one and it said 75%, how do I know how to assess that, right? So I will say, as someone with a degree in education, generally teachers aren't taught how to teach. They're just sort of thrown to the lions, and they have subject matter expertise. And you can see if you start with like a graduate student, assistant professor, up to a tenured professor, they gradually figure out how to teach, but they don't generally get to learn all the tools that they're using. So I was in a training today at the University of Denver on how to use Canvas, right? It was all these sort of interesting edge tools and capabilities, but it's like, isn't everyone who's teaching here already an expert on Canvas? You know, and in the same way, so now we have tools that can tell us, oh, this might have been written by an AI. I don't know, how do I assess that? So maybe that doesn't matter so much unless it's like a rock solid 100%, this is for sure AI software. And then that's just a matter of time, because it's not going to be very long. In fact, some people have told me it's already there, where you can just say, here's 20 essays I wrote, write a 21st in the same style. At which point, how do you even know, right? But who cares? At some level, again, it's about education. When I have the students that are trying to figure out how to learn the subject in my class, they're the people I teach to. I can't police everybody. If you want to come to this lecture and press the record button and then play games on your phone and then go home and never listen to the recording, well, you can tell people you came to this meeting and you heard 3 professors talk about AI in education, but you didn't really learn it, right? I think that this is just a life challenge that we have, and I think AI is just another iteration of it. And I do want to point out that at least AI has a sense of humor. So this is the Bing chat, and I went and I said, write about why AI should be banned in educational settings, and it refused to do it, right? This is like totally James Cameron level stuff. I'm sorry, I cannot generate a paragraph with a professional tone on why AI should be banned, because I think the tone is potentially harmful and biased against AI. Wow, okay, I'm not sure that's the case, but that's okay because we have comics about this too. So watch this. Chatbot, create a 500-word essay about Maria Mitchell as it would be written by me. Okay, here you go. So amazing. And then her friend, Chatbot, can you give the essay the grade it would get? Yup, D+. And the accuracy is amazing too. So again, I mean, I think that these two also capture this whole idea of what are we trying to accomplish and how is AI going to gracefully fit into academia and education, whether you're in 5th grade or 10th grade or applying to a college or working on your master's degree. So here's what I've done. So in all these meetings at DU, I have said, cool, we use something called simple syllabus. So we have a sort of unified syllabus across all classes with a couple of cut and paste paragraphs. And I and many other professors have said, can we put something in simple syllabus about AI? And the university's like, well, we're not there yet. We're not sure we want to commit to that yet. So we're not going to do that. And so then I said, all right, well, I need to have a policy for my students so we have some agreed upon parameters and regulations. So here's what I say in my syllabus now, is the purpose of this course is to expand your knowledge and your independent thinking. As a result, all work you produce should be your own work. You're allowed to experiment with AI language models to support your original work by using it for brainstorming. So I offer these guidelines, and I have posted on a couple of different academic Reddit groups and such, and so it's starting to have some other professors use it too. But I'm going to leave you with this idea, is that here's what I think are appropriate uses of AI in academia and in education. And that includes things like brainstorming. These tools are amazing. I mean, you can just go and say, what are the 5 primary causes of World War II? And boom, it's like a really interesting set of possible reasons for World War II. And it's just like, okay, well, hopefully you still will assess that and say, I don't think number 4 should be in the top 5. But those sort of things are really amazing. It's really good at that and ridiculously fast. But you can ask for definitions, key considerations, fine-tune your research questions, seek guidance on how to frame an argument, identify examples, grammar and style, but unacceptable uses. And this is, of course, the most important section in everything here, which is you can't request a complete essay or analysis. You can't turn in what AI has generated. And I think it's important to just state that. And again, one of the things that a lot of professors have learned over time is you can't just assume your students are going to agree with you on parameters. You need to just state things in black and white, because then you can go back and point to them. So you can't ask for direct summaries or recommendations. You can't ask it to generate a bibliography, quotes or evidence, etc. So that's where I am in the trenches with my students. I'm teaching a class right now, and I think tonight they have to be submitting their first discussion posts by midnight tonight. So at about 11 p.m. tonight, it's going to be a lot of flurry of activity on Canvas. But I'll leave you with this question of, what do you think? Everyone here either has been or is currently in college, either working on a bachelor's or a graduate degree, or you were in high school. How would you use AI? How would you have used AI? And if you were the instructor, how would you want your students to use AI? And with that, I'm done. 2 minutes to spare. Woot. And thank you all very much.
Dave, I will ask the 3 speakers to come up in the front, and I'm going to give you this mic and I'll take the lav. So I'll trade you.
Okay, we have not rehearsed any of our answers, just so you know.
Justine, but are you using ChatGPT for it? Okay, let me open up the floor, and I'll have someone ask a question, and then either I could repeat it or one of the speakers could repeat it, so the Zoom people can hear the question, and then I have some questions from Zoom as well. Sir. So the question, for the benefit of the Zoom people, is how important is it to explain how the technology works, how the large language models work, how these chatbots work, the neural nets behind the scenes? Because for most people, it's a black box. And I agree with that for the mass of people. And maybe in understanding it better, the question is, would that be helpful in this discussion?
So, Bob, when you were teaching your children how to drive, did you explain how internal combustion engines worked?
No, but we definitely explain how steering works and how they're shifting if it's a manual transmission. Right, a little bit of that.
So my point is that I think that we are surrounded by technologies we don't understand. So this is just another one. So.
And I'll take a different tack. As one of the things we're doing at the Institute is we're also building curricula for middle schoolers, and we have built an AI curricula around AI and gaming, where they actually build chatbots. They actually also build moderation tools, build little rule-based things to try to do moderation. But part of that is not just teaching them how the AI works, it's also teaching them the ethics, like what can you say in a chat room, what you can't. And so we're starting to sort of think about what kinds of education do they need to be sophisticated enough to be good consumers and users.
And I agree with you that understanding the technology of how the language models respond is important. And I don't have the technical knowledge of it that most of the people in this room seem to have, but the bit that I get so far is that it's a probability machine, right? And so want to explain to my students that if you are trying to do a creative writing piece, for example, I think this is an interesting tool for if I start a story and I feed it into ChatGPT and I say, okay, what's the most likely 10 ways that this story might go? If I really want to be creative, I want that information so I can do something different. But if they understand that probability piece, then they can think about how to use it or how to use it to figure out what not to do. That's one idea I have, but I'm still learning the ins and outs of this.
Thank you. Let me read a question from Josiah, who is on the Zoom call. It's for Peter, and he says, have you gotten any privacy pushback from parents of students? What in your architecture is allowing the different modalities to be integrated? Is it textual or vector at its core?
So that's two different questions. We've done a lot to talk to students and teachers and parents about privacy. Everything we've had to do has had to be consented, but we've also brought the students in, and part of it is that they've actually been helping with some of the designs there to think about sort of how it could be used and can't be used. And so part of the idea, like this tree that grows, is something that they also helped us build, rather than having an agent that's sitting there listening to them. And also another thing that came out of that was that they were much more open to being able to be given positive feedback rather than negative feedback. But what they don't want is something that's like tattling on them, telling the teacher. In terms of the integration, we're doing a lot of work now on integrating multiple modalities. So some of that is focusing, we've got a group of people who are working on gestures, and also how do we extract meaning from gestures. So somebody says, well, move this over here. How do we turn that into something where we know what they're talking about from their gesture and from the language at the same time? And at the same time, we're also capturing eye movements, so we're looking at where they're looking and where people are doing it. So there's a lot of work going on in that side.
Thank you. When you were showing the tree diagram and the positive feedback, I was thinking about dolphin training, right? When the dolphin does something right, you throw out a herring, but when it does something wrong, you don't hit it with a baseball bat. You know, it's just purely positive reinforcement for when it does stuff right. And that seems like the approach you guys are using. Okay, let me do one more from the Zoom call. This is from Michael. Are there any resources or lesson plans for teachers to teach about LLMs, teach about large language models that you guys are aware of?
Honestly, I think I would ask the LLM for a lesson plan to explain its own internals.
There you have it. Okay, let's do another audience question. I'm actually going to hand you the mic because it's just too hard to kind of relay, and then the audience will hear sort of the back and forth. So let me bring the mic here.
Have you looked at all at playing around with the data's kind of when the data ended for like ChatGPT for playing around with designing your curriculum? This is mostly for the teachers about kind of, I think ChatGPT's sunset date was like September 2021.
Yeah,
so anything after that is basically not in it and has to be added for like you can add it back in for context, but it does go and help a little bit.
For the fall, one of my classes is a paper, writing a research paper kind of course. And I have been thinking about using a novel that just came out in 2022 and as the basis for their discussions, and then they can go in research directions on any topic related to the novel. So it would be hard for them to get analysis of that novel.
As a warning, by the way, though, now that I just
it won't last
this,
long.
well, it's actually Claude has like a 10,000, 100,000 character or context. So they could put the whole novel into a pod and
But I'm really more interested, I think my way of getting around that is not so much like trying to cheat the system of, oh, well,
Yeah.
they won't have this information, but it really is getting them to show me the process they go through and to come up with scenarios of how they can role play with chat to have it either tutor them, collaborate with them, give them feedback on their writing in a variety of different ways that they can use it so that they learn its capabilities and how they can learn from it, as opposed to just trying to figure out how can I, yeah. But I have been thinking about something later, partly for that reason.
And to some extent, I feel like that's sort of the tail wagging the dog. So if I'm teaching film, I'm not going to restrict myself to films that came out in the last 18 months, though Oppenheimer's really good, separate conversation. So yes, as I said in my presentation, there is an opportunity to cheat. And in fact, with a lot of these AI models, if you ask them to summarize a novel it didn't know, it would make something up. That's okay. Don't worry. So I think that that's a current limitation, but there's no reason in the world that tomorrow OpenAI could say, oh yeah, we just added 3 years of data. So.
Thank you. Is part of this with students trying to help them understand if you cheat, you're simply cheating yourself. Like you might get through with a high grade, but if you haven't gotten the learning, you didn't accomplish what you were trying to accomplish.
Depending on what they're trying to accomplish. So true story, not naming any names, a friend of my son just graduated DU, coincidence that he is there actually. But he has a friend who's still in college and he's just finishing up his degree program and he's taking classes he doesn't care about. And these classes are because he just needs to hit a number on a chart so that he can get his certificate that says he has a bachelor's degree. So he has admitted to us that he's using AI tools to help him get through the class faster and with less work. And so what is his goal in this class? Why is he taking this class, right? He doesn't want to. He doesn't care about the material. It's not going to materially affect his ability to be successful as an adult, which might or might not be what a degree is supposed to be doing anyway. So yes, he's cheating himself out of a learning opportunity, but I don't know that he thinks of it that way. So it's just, there's a lot of people with a lot of reasons to be looking at a lot of these tools.
Good point. Thank you. Okay, next question here.
Thank you. Hi, this is a question for Peter about your, what is it? Kobe.
Community builder.
Kobe. So it's really fascinating. So I had two questions. One is there live feedback? Like, does the tree grow while they're actually interacting? Are they watching that? Yeah. And then the other question is are you studying the outcomes? Like, is there any kind of control, like an actual teacher in a classroom doing collaboration building and this new technology?
So one, it is growing live as students are using it. One of the things we found actually is students don't pay a lot of attention to it. And maybe that's good because they're still focusing on the tasks they're doing, and giving them AI or an AI bot only might get in the way of it. So it is happening. They can see it's growing. We're finding they're not looking at it that much. But what actually happens, and as part of the curriculum now, is that afterwards, there's an average tree of all the teams that the teacher has, and the teacher puts it up on her screen and they have a discussion. They talk about which leaves are there, and I didn't also show it, but you can click on the leaves, and what it does is it does noticings. So it will pull up something of an example shown anonymously of a good example of respect or a good example of building moving thinking forward. And so we design it as a way to be able to show some of those things and have a teacher be involved and use it as a teaching tool to help sort of be the community builder or lead the community building. Oh, yes, yes. So we're studying it in the classroom. So we've doing a variety of different studies. Right now, we're not doing sort of a true randomized control study because you can't really tell teachers, oh, don't use these tools, or we don't really want to do it. But we are doing some studies where we change some of the different features and see how people use them differently.
Thank you. Let's do another question, sort of a two-part question from the Zoom listeners. Please share other tools for automating the grading of papers. That's from Stephen. How do we know they are good? That's from Bob.
Well, I'll start because that's sort of what I've been working on for like the last 20 years. So my technology was actually acquired by Pearson and was integrated into a number of different products now that are part of sort of the Pearson empire of for higher education. But there are a lot of other companies now that have built automated scoring systems. A lot of that has focused on now building them for giving automated feedback. And the second part of that question is, well, how well do they work? They work slightly better. They're slightly more accurate than teachers. And there've been a lot of studies that show that. And, you know, I jokingly say it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be as good as a human. But you know, you don't get a lot of agreement also when humans grade things. But the real goal is not to sort of focus on this perfection on grading. The real focus is on how do you give feedback that's going to cause learning. And that's sort of where I think people sort of focus is like, well, does the grade agree? Well, no, it's like, can you point out things that are useful? And I think that's sort of where the tools are trying to move right now.
So I will say that I use these tools like the Turnitin, the plagiarism checking. Those are the quantitative numbers that help me start to get a picture. But part of the reason I teach is because I enjoy reading my students' work. I enjoy watching their presentations. I enjoy understanding how they've synthesized a topic. And I don't want a tool to do that for me. And if I'm in a situation where I have to teach 500 students, I'd just say no. You know, so I might have the freedom in a way that people that actually are full-time at a university don't. But, you know, that gets to the sort of quality of life for educators too. So I think these tools are really fascinating, but I can't imagine a scenario at any point in the future where I'll just say, hey, grade it, bot. Just give me a score and I'll just enter that into the grade book, or you just do the whole thing. Just grade everyone's assignments because I'm too busy. At which point I feel like I'm not even a teacher at that point. So.
Good perspective. Thank you. So we have about 15 minutes left. I'll do some questions on this side of the room. Bill?
How much momentum are you guys seeing, particularly at the university level, around not just sort of allowing tools like ChatGPT, but requiring them, right? And I think Dan's point at the beginning with his mentee, where he said, you know, I'm brand new into this job and I'm suddenly using, you know, ChatGPT or other LLMs on a daily basis. How much are we preparing these kids to come out and really understand how to use it in productive ways, particularly in maybe less in humanities, but, you know, marketing, finance, software engineering, all these things where they need to be able to come in and sit down and on day one, be able to productively use those and know how to use them both productively as well as appropriately in a professional environment, because I think that's what people are going to be looking for right away.
Oh, well, I agree with you about that. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we want to develop this Writing in the Age of AI certificate, to give the students who are in the humanities and the social sciences a sense that this isn't something that just the STEM students can do. They also need to participate in this and get ready for it and know how to use it, and that's okay, that it's expected.
Yeah, I would ask, is the purpose of higher education to create workers? Right. So Is it the responsibility of CU Boulder to create more productive employees or better managers? Well, maybe in some cases, maybe an MBA program with a focus on general management probably should make you a better manager. That seems like a reasonable goal. But in a lot of situations, I would suggest maybe that's not the case. Having said that, I have more than once proposed to the University of Denver, let's create a class on how to use AI in a professional setting, and they're not quite there yet. So maybe they'll be there tomorrow, hopefully. So.
Stephen from Zoom says, I bet a high number of teachers are learning about AI at the same time as students. That's true for sure. Other questions over here?
Hi, this is Saumi. I am a grad student here in the Atlas, and I study human-computer interaction, especially user experience. From your presentation about the iSAT, I had already read a lot of articles about that. I just wanted to know what role does product designers, user experience, those people have in designing those artificial intelligence systems?
So one of the things that we've done with this is to create sort of a very large group, and unfortunately I didn't show that in any of the slides. So one of the things we apply is a good amount of co-design, where we're working with the students, teachers, and parents in trying to understand what they're trying to do. So a lot of this was trying to sort of understand community building. We also then have graphic designers, AI designers, and cognitive psychologists and HCI researchers all part of that whole design. So we have a very large number of people who are all involved there. And we have these very large sessions. And I will say, a lot of people don't always agree, and we learn a lot. I'm learning a huge amount from some of the education people in there. And even more, we see that a lot of the time we're spending time just trying to learn the same language of how to think. But I think one of the outgrowths of this is not just the design we're building, but also getting all these different constituencies to learn how to talk to each other. So we've got AI developers who are just like, I just build a model. And you just say, well, but you also need to be able to talk to the educator and say, what does that model do? How does it work? Why does it work? What are the issues there? So I'd say part of it is trying to bring together all these groups together to help them build.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks. I have one more question from Pete, who's online. Has anyone looked at how AI can be used to help differentiate instruction for ESL and special ed students? Would it be quote unquote fair to allow some students to use AI and not others? Anyone have an opinion on that?
That is a very sticky wicket, because this gets into issues of accessibility and, there are students, for example, that have different neuroprocessing, so they get more time on tests. Is that fair? Is that fair to the students that don't get more time on the test? I think that the consensus would be, yes, it is, because that's getting everyone to the same level. So one of the things that we've been exploring is there are students that we have that aren't very good in writing. They just don't write very well. So wouldn't it be beneficial for them to be able to use tools to improve their writing? And if that's the case, then obviously like spell check in Word and Grammarly are steps on that road. But how far down the road do we want them to be able to go and still have it be fair? If I have to slave away for an entire weekend on an essay and someone else just says, I wrote 4 bullet points and it did all the work. So I don't think that's an easily answered question, and it might be absolutely contextual depending on the environment and the student population.
I think that's a great answer. And I'll just add, I think one of the things is it's a forcing function to cause teachers to think about what are the skills that I actually care about. So that when they're designing their course, when they're designing everything, they have to think about that there are certain skills they care about, others they don't. And I think it sort of came as a large package, like, oh, you must be able to write and express yourself and also talk about the topic. But now some of those are getting broken out. So they have to think a lot more about specific skills.
I've also seen discussions online about some of these AI robots being like a specialized tutor, one-on-one, tuned to a specific student's needs in a way that we probably couldn't afford to do with real human tutors. And so that's kind of a fascinating upside to it. Okay, next question.
Thank you. I walked in here with the assumption that AI detectors were kind of decent, and now I know that they're not. Ignoring the ethical component, like just focusing solely on the technical component, do you think AI detectors will catch up, or will the generators always just be one step ahead?
Yeah, I spend some time advising people around these detectors and looking at the statistics on it. And, I think currently, if you have a classroom of 200 students and you're okay with wrongly failing 10 to 20 students because of that, then okay. But you have to understand what the trade-offs are. And the false alarm rate on these can be very high, and it also can have differential false alarm rates on students for other reasons, like English as a second language or neurodiversity. And so there's some interesting equity issues as well.
Okay, in our final time, we have about 8 minutes left. Let's go big picture. This is Stephen from the Zoom call. What do you think education will look like in 5 years?
I'll go first. It's going to look a lot like it does today. Honestly, I think that we're going to see bumps with these things, and then we're going to see schools and teachers and parents actually push back to the students and say, your goal here isn't just to get to the end point. Your goal here is to learn. And there will be a subset of students that will say, whatever, and I'm going to just take the laziest, easiest way possible. And they've always been around. Now they're just new tools for them. So I don't think it's going to be dramatically different in 5 years. What do you think?
I brought up the issue of that 80-90% of the work is going to be working on edge cases. If you think about it, we were promised self-driving cars a long time ago, and they're not here. It's the same thing as your personalized learning robot. It sounds really easy to build now that you've seen something on ChatGPT, but the details to get it to really work right and not also do something really damaging or suddenly start spouting off false history or racist remarks takes a lot of work. And so it's not going to really come about in the next 5 years.
And I guess I would also add that I would hope that in the next 5 years, the love of learning itself and of knowledge and literature and the arts, all of those inspirational kinds of works that what brings us here, that isn't going to go away. And so we're going to have students who are here simply because they really enjoy this stuff. And it's not about what career they're going into next. So that may be overly optimistic, but I have a lot of students who are here for those reasons. They need the degree to go on to the next thing, but while they're here, they really just want to enjoy learning the stuff that they find exciting and fascinating. So I don't think that's going to change.
Thank you. About 5 minutes left. We'll go to another audience question.
Thank you. My question is for Peter. How do you account for or personalize the experience for neurodivergent students or introverts?
Yeah, we've talked about it a lot. I think this is really difficult, and we haven't solved all those questions. For introverts, I think it is a little different. We've actually been working on this problem of the idea of equity, that you can't just define and say, well, equity is everybody talks equally. And sometimes one person can say one thing, and just the fact that they brought up one point during that class is wonderful. Whereas somebody who talks so much, the fact that they're a little quieter during that class might be wonderful. And so we've been struggling with this a little bit, and we even held a one-day workshop on class equity in classrooms, just talking about this issue to sort of think about how to do it. That said, we don't have a perfect solution, but we also know that just telling computer everybody has to talk equally is not going to be the right thing.
And let me add just a super quick story. So I teach a public speaking class through Zoom asynchronously. And there are some students where I think they would do better in a classroom with an audience of 10 or 20 students who would be like nodding and saying, yeah, you're doing good. But there are other students that this is such a blessing that they're at home, they're in a quiet apartment, they just push the record button and they can do it 7 or 8 times until they get one that they're comfortable with. And so, there's pros and cons, and there's going to be some environments that are going to work really great for neurodivergent students. And there are going to be other environments, as we have today, where they're just like the worst case scenario and they're super challenging. And I think that that's not going to change. It's just, we live in a complex multimodal society.
Okay, we're probably down to our last question. Here you go.
I'm curious, we've talked about maybe adding courses where people learn about AI and how it works. I've also heard it said that like AI is kind of commoditizing intelligence, and with just this little tool here, we can do a lot more. Even if I'm not a good writer, I can be a good writer in all my business dealings and that sort of thing. I'm wondering, are there any classes that you think in education, higher ed or otherwise, that we don't need to teach anymore, or that should be dropped, that are like just not important because we need to focus on these other things that are more about like critical thinking or skills that can't be, replaced with ChatGPT?
And yes, this is being recorded.
Yeah. Wait till the dean's here. Yeah. I'll say that I don't know if it's particular courses, but it might be the emphasis within certain courses. And I think sometimes you may have spent more time on teaching certain basic things that aren't needed as much now, like expression. But I think there are also certain things where there might need to be much greater emphasis, like critical thinking and evaluation of content that is available online, where that you don't want to just have a special course in that. That needs to be embedded everywhere, so that if you're taking a course in, marketing, in political science, in literature, anytime you're accessing information online, thinking about it more critically.
And I would add to that we have to be really cautious about thinking that there's like certain things that these have to be in everyone's college experience. I think one of the gifts of what we do in academia is that there's a wide variety that provides interesting things for different learners who want to go in different directions, and there's not a one track fits all kind of approach. So I'd be hesitant to say that anything should go, but maybe more courses should be added in terms of more opportunities, more directions, and interests.
Not to sound old, but when I was in high school, we used a card catalog in the library to find books, right? Anyone else ever did that? Okay, no. See, look at this. That's obsolete. So now I would not teach that, right? So things change as we continue to march forward. And I don't think it's going to change. I don't think AI is going to instantly obsolete a bunch of things. it is exactly what I think Peter said, is that we're going to have to refocus a little bit and change from generation to analysis and assessment. But I don't know that there's going to be an enormous number of things that are just going to be able to go away. So.
Thank you very much. I'm seeing some thank you messages from Zoom. Please join me in thanking all the speakers. And that's a wrap.